Regarding a tubular space frame, what processes do you need to think about after welding?
Okay, so I think it's really important to understand that welding might not be the only process that you need to cost. You might have to do some sort of heat treatment that will take out the stressors. This is one of the things that I think students sometimes forget about, and whether you did it actually in real life or not, it's maybe something that you need to think about and cost for in the future as well.
How many direct hours per year for each individual employee have you allowed?
So it's really important, if you are thinking about utilisation of any workforce or any resource, a person can only work for so long in the year. They have a finite time that they're at work. Let's say 9 to 5 as an example, but this could be a shift pattern. You are not going to be productive for all of those hours. You're going to have sometimes when you're on breaks, you're going to have sometimes when you're training, you're going to have sometimes when you're doing admin. This is called a utilisation. So it might be, the rule of thumb is that you can only be useful for 75% of your working time. So you need to figure out what your work time is, what that equates to in terms of available hours for the year, what your hourly rate is for that. Maybe that's a salarised person, but worked down into an hourly rate, and then a utilisation rate. And then that is your useful hours that you can put into your cycle times for your processes. So it's not just you will work 9 till 5 and I'll get 8 hours out of you and you'll be 100% productive at 15 euros an hour, for example. There are lots of other things that go into that.
Sustainability. Why is it relevant to your project, and what other aspects should you consider other than just recycling to enhance your proposition?
So, sustainability is an interesting one, and it's been done very well in the past, but also it's been done poorly. And I think there is a general tendency to people not fully understanding it, whether that's something that isn't taught or just generally not known. I think it's something that is very, very important now in industry. In the industry I work in now, we're being tested for sustainability in our tender packs as well. So we need to be talking at the tender stage of what we're going to do to account for sustainability. Now, sustainability in an engineering specifics, what we're talking about here is embedded CO2 and also recyclability at the end. But also sustainability could be that we're doing ethical procurement, so that we're not procuring from areas where modern day slavery is an issue. That's something to talk about. But in terms of embedded CO2, is it a energy rich process? Are we doing a lot of heating? Is the manufacturing process particularly energy abundant? Also, the recyclability at the end of the process. Are you creating a lot of carbon fibre that just can't be recycled, it's just got to go to landfill? Or do you create it with a mat that can be recycled? We can take the resin out of it and recycle the fibres for future carbon fibre structures. All this features into your sustainability, and if you can explain it in a concise and entertaining way, that's what the judges are going to go, these guys or girls know exactly what they're talking about, and we need to give them the points for that.
What was the initial real-world budget for the car? What's changed and why?
So, we normally ask the question of how much money have you had to spend on this? We recognise in the old Formula Student world, the budgets that we used to create were artificial, and now we're saying cost the car that you see in front of you. We recognise that you will get elements of that for free, and we've asked you to cost it for real world costs. The reason that we're asking for the real world budget for your team is we are interested in how you've used that budget. Have you been creative? Have you been innovative? Have you had to fight for anything? And we want to hear about those things so we can give you credit for it. There are a lot of teams that don't want to talk about this, and they feel that if they say they've got a high budget, 50,000 euros, whatever it is, even up into the hundreds of thousands of euros, that will count against them. I don't care if you've had 100,000 euros or 1,000 euros. I am more interested in how you've spent that. So if you've used that 100,000 euros and been really efficient and effective in your budgeting, you will score more points than somebody that's had 1,000 euros and just gone, oh, I can't be bothered, we spent it on beer, for instance. It's really important that we see the logic behind it and see how you've used that budget and how you've invested your time to make it go as far as possible. So don't be afraid of talking about budget. Don't be afraid of talking about your failures. If you've done something and it was wasteful and you've recognised it, tell the judges. I guarantee they will tell you of a little story of when they've done something similar, or when they've spent or wasted all their businesses, or they've heard of something where they've wasted millions of pounds and they've made that mistake, just as you guys will have done as you've gone along. Failure is not a negative if you learn from it, and it's really important that we sort of draw those out in Formula Student as well.
What is the reasoning behind manufacturing something in-house when a proprietary component with a little modification will do the same job?
Okay, so it's a balancing act between, have you built something that's cost aggressive or performance aggressive? So my colleagues in design might look at something and go, wow, you've manufactured something that's really lightweight, it's going to be super efficient on the car, and it's going to give you X amount of lap time. That's great. We might look at that and go, yeah, but the cost of that relative to the performance gain isn't really efficient. So why have you done that? Why didn't you just go and buy it off the shelf? Now, it's perfectly legitimate to turn around to a judge and go, our focus and our intention was to make this car as quick as possible. So we have made a conscious cost decision to spend more to enable that. That's reasonable. So that's your first thing that you do. The second thing is, and I can back that up with data because this is my feasibility study that proves it. As soon as you've done that, you've taken the wind out of the judge's sail, and you are going to be on the front foot, and you are going to be leading that conversation because you have made a conscious cost decision with proper justification for an outcome that you designed at the beginning of this. I can't argue with that as a cost judge. So think about that and think about how you're going to do it, and how you're going to do it in a polite way that makes the judge think that you're good and not just showing off. That's really important as well, as it is with anything in the world. So have a think about that and try and apply that in the event.
Why have you used an exotic material such as carbon fibre over a more traditional material such as steel? What are the positive and negative aspects with respect to cost versus performance impacts for this rationale?
Okay, so I've been in a lot of scenarios in my nearly 20 years of cost judging now where I've seen people use carbon fibre over a more traditional material such as metal, carbon steel. And when I've challenged them, for instance, on carbon wishbones, why have you done that? Well, because it's out of carbon, so it's better. Yeah, but why have you done it? The rest of your car is 300 kilograms and you've chosen to do carbon wishbones. Oh, but you know, I did that part of the car and it's as optimized as it can be. The rest of the car wasn't my responsibility. You have to see how that looks to a judge, and I would argue even to a design judge as well. The thought and the overall costing of the car is separate. It's uncoupled from each other. So think about why you're using materials and if it's in tone with the rest of the car. And actually, yes, it would be great to make things out of composite and make it lighter, and it's an evolution. And that might be one way of getting away with it and going, look, we recognise that this aspect of the car isn't as optimised as it can be, but the bodywork is, and we will carry that design concept through. Therefore, it's right to have it now because we've got the tooling for it for next year, and that's a cost saving. But be prepared to justify that, because you will find that judges will gravitate to areas that don't feel right. If you have a really heavy car that's unoptimised, but you've done composite wishbones that bring in inherent weakness, potential to fail, damage, and everything else that goes with that, yes, they're lighter for that component, but the benefit gain for the rest of the car on saving a bit of weight at the back, for instance, would be more beneficial. So have a think about that, and have a think how somebody who's been doing cost engineering for a long time will look at that car as well.
With regards to value engineering activities, can you discuss and provide evidence of these activities and resulting beneficial changes to your vehicle design from your initial vehicle concept?
So I think it's really important to, and as we've alluded to in some of the other questions, make sure that you're accounting for every cent or penny of spend that you're doing within your vehicle. So if you have to do a value exercise, let's just say, for instance, that a global pandemic happens and your budget gets cut by 30%. Where are you going to save that money from? What's your fallback position? So if I am doing a composite tub, can I fall back to a space frame? What will that save me? Will I be in budget still? What compromises will I have to do? What value exercises do I need to do? It's the unknown unknowns that you're looking for. You may find that a sponsor will pull out last minute, and just when you thought you would have everything there, you have to re-engineer something and save some money because you physically don't have the cash to spend. This is all about value engineering. It's not a nice thing to do, but it's a fact of life and a reality. And as a team, just as you would have in industry, you've got to start thinking about these things right from the get-go, because the unknown will hit you. Sod's law will hit you. And you need to be ready for it. And unfortunately, that's a fact of life. So have a think about it early on, and it won't be a shock for you if and when it happens.
What were your agreed business case material costs and process cost targets at the start of your project? What do the glide paths for actual versus target look like over the last 12 months for both material and process costs?
The cost report, I think, is a useful way of demonstrating that you understood cost. But it isn't the only way. There's going to be a lot of other tools that you will use in the real world to make sure that you get to an end product. Now, this could be good project management, a good Gantt chart, a good way of doing a profit and loss on your spend. Anything in, anything out, making sure you keep your receipts, making sure you're on track. These mechanisms are just as important to show the judges when you're on the day. If you have a notebook that's basically kept a validation of all your cost meetings and kept account of everything that you've done cost-wise, have that in reserve so you can talk about it at the event. It might not come up, but if you get that odd question of, well, how did you manage costs? How did you make sure that you stayed on budget? Well, look, this is what I did. This is the tools that I referred to. This is how I governed the team and how I steered them. And it's that level of detail and ability to justify your cost existence that will get you those higher points and get you those higher confidence with the judges.
Discuss what risks and cost overruns your team faced. What contingency actions did you put in place to offset to keep actual costs aligned to targets?
So life's a risk. That's a fundamental fact. You will come across throughout your project and your working lives things that go wrong. You need to account for those things early on. You need contingencies within your budgets. You need to account for risks that may be coming. So right now we're in the middle of a pandemic. There are risks that you might need to outsource more of your vehicle. So you should have been factoring those things in early. Right, what contingencies do I need? Can I get back into the workshop? Well, I need to outsource welding, for instance, and factoring those into your budgets and making sure that you take account of those and monitoring them. So if you start seeing overruns, you can immediately flip into your contingency plans. It's really important that you stay on top of this. If you're passive and deal with it just as they come along, it's too late. You need to have those mitigations ready to go so that you can put them in place and start them working. I guarantee the teams that do well at Formula Student are the teams that finish early and are the teams that have lots of testing and find out what's wrong with their car and break it. You can only do that if you are effective in your management and you make sure that you're not, for instance, trying to manufacture something because you literally can't afford to send it out or get it manufactured by a third party. This is where all these cost overruns come, and then time overruns, and that means that you're chasing your tail, building the car in the van on the way to Silverstone, all these things that we hear of that we know happen and that are absolutely, and I can't stress this enough, completely avoidable when you see it in the light of day and you're not living and breathing in Formula Student team world. You will look back at your time and go, I can't believe we didn't do X that way. And that's just a learning curve, and that's why we're doing Formula Student. That's why it's so important, because we want you to make these mistakes, which are wonderful mistakes that we all learn from right now, rather than doing it in your career when you're in your grad scheme, when it really does count. So have a think about that and hopefully apply it, and hopefully it'll help you.
From a cost perspective, how do you justify choosing to develop an electric vehicle over an internal combustion vehicle?
So I think one of the things that goes overlooked is, why did you go down the EV route? And again, why did you go down the EV route from a cost perspective? We know that actually that public opinion and the trend is going towards EV cars, which are great. But from a cost perspective, buying a CBR 600 engine or a Yamaha 600 engine is probably cheaper than buying all the cells and the controllers and the cooling and everything that goes with it. So you need to be able to justify that. And again, the justification is down to you and down to your interpretation of it. Are we faster? Yes. Is it a more sustainable future? Yes. Is it that our department wants us to go in that direction because actually we want to have a sustainable image? Yes. But why are you justifying that? What is the cost impact of that? Know what you're going into and know the differences, and be able to justify that in quantitative terms as well. So can you turn around and say, well, actually we get more students coming into our university as a result of our Formula Student team being an EV team? And we've quantified this, and this looks like this figure to the university. If you give that information to the judges, you are then making a decision based on facts again. It's a scientific output, and it's not just a subjective, we wanted to make an EV car or we think it's quicker, which it probably is, but it's justifying that existence and justifying why you're doing something. That's the fundamental fact of cost engineering and the cost of manufacturing event. Why did you do it? What effect does it have? How much better will your output be as a result of that? If you can take anything away and just do those things, you'll be successful at cost of manufacturing.
Should you cost something if the team gets it for free, or if students or university staff are carrying out the labour for free?
Yes, is the simple answer to that. We're trying to get an overview of the cost of the car that's presented in front of us. We recognise that student labour is cheap labour because we're not outsourcing it. But it's still labour, and it's still a resource that we would have to account for in the real world. So we want to account for that in cost of manufacturing for the student world. Also, if you're getting it for free, if it's a sponsored part, if it's a carryover part, we still need you to cost that. We need you to look at what it would cost in the real world and make the application in your cost pack. It's not in your interest to make that more expensive or cheaper. We don't care what the final cost of your car is, within the bounds of reason. If your car comes out at 2 million euros, we are going to question some things because it doesn't feel like it should be 2 million euros. Or actually, if you've got 2 million euros, why haven't you got a super McLaren in front of you? However, the judges will look at that and look at what's reasonable and what's applicable. So think about what's applicable. Demon Tweaks is a great go-to, internet searches, those sort of things, and quantify it and put it in as it would cost in the real world. And again, apply the labour forces as you would do for your cost explanation file and apply that in the correct way as well.
What are the scoring or marking criteria for the cost and manufacturing event?
So what's the scoring criteria? So this is a very, very common question that I get asked. Can you please tell me what the scoring criteria is and what I need to say to show you that I can score in those areas? Unfortunately, this has been a trend that we've seen in the last maybe 5 or 6 years, where students have come through and gone, actually out in the universities, this is what we need to see in your exams, and if you write these things, this will be the end result and this will be what you score. That is absolutely not what happens in the real world. So it would be very easy for me to give you a scoring sheet and say the judges are looking for these things in these areas. By maybe, if not 1 year, but maybe even 2 iterations of Formula Student, we would get very common presentations, very common packs, and everything would look the same and everyone would score top marks because I'm telling you exactly what I need. What I've tried to say to you at the beginning is the judges will look at things in different ways. They're different people. Yes, we make sure that the marking scheme is aligned and we make sure that people are judging fairly, but it's going to be subjective. It's going to be their opinion. If I give you a scoring sheet and with the definitives of what you need to say to score X amount of points, it's not going to help you. You've got to be able to think on your feet, to navigate through those conversations, to feel when things aren't going quite as well as you want and bring it back onto course and then steer them to the good stuff. So the number of times I've been judging teams and we're just about to walk away and we've gone, what's that? And they've gone, oh, that's amazing, we got that for free, or we made this in another way, and we went, oh my God, why didn't you tell us about that 10 minutes ago so we could spend some more time looking at it? You've got to think about these things ahead of time and think about how you're going to pitch that to judges and how you're going to sell your idea. So I'm not ever going to give you a scoring sheet, and it's going to change year to year as things change and priorities come, but think about what we would likely be asking. Say it again, justifying your answers, justifying the reasons that you've done something, and really giving considerable time to thinking about how you've costed this vehicle and how you've made it as cost efficient as you possibly can, and sell that idea to the judges. If you do all those things, it doesn't matter what the score sheet says, I think you'll be successful.
If you could go back and give yourself advice before you took part in the event, what would that advice be?
That's a really good question. I'd say slow down, calm down. These people are your friends who are judging you. They actually don't want to catch you out. They are as interested in your car as you have been, and they want to hear about all the good stuff. Slow down. Have your backup data ready to go. Don't be afraid to tell them about the times you failed, because that's the most interesting bits and what you've learned from that and how you'll apply it in the future. Be polite, ask their opinion, find out information from them. And the other thing that I would say to anybody that's done Formula Student is get back involved as a judge, because I have learned so much from being a judge and now being a head judge and working on the committee and developing it. It's one of the things that I love and look forward to each year. So I would definitely go back and say, be a judge, get back involved, stay back involved, don't leave Formula Student. It doesn't end when you leave Silverstone or wherever the event is. They are your team for life, and there's a part you can play in the future of the event as well. So good luck with it.